want to know what self-proclamation and self-clamation did to society? It created this society of people who are really struggling with mental illness, and that mental illness is delusion, right? People are not sharing the same realities because people are living in another world. And this isn't to just hit statistics or facts or anything, but like people have seriously been taken out of the real world, right? Like social media has literally transported the minds, the dreams, the ideologies, and the realities of so many people, because reality for so many people is a very hard pill to swallow. Like people are not doing well with realism. People do not do well with authenticity. People do not do well in the real world because people are mentally weak, right? Social media has made a lot of people mentally weaker. I was reading Asada Shakur, and she just talked about how the TV, right? And this was obviously back in the 90s, but the TV made everyone's brain like mush, right? And so now that we have these little portable TVs, right, in our devices, and that's what I'm recording on today, and there's no set time frame, right? Like before, you would just watch TV at night, and then they started inventing, here, take your TV and put it in front of your little food tray and have your dinner, and then here's the TV dinner, right? So it's like, now that it is so close to us, it is so attached to us, we cannot turn it off and differentiate. When I listen to women, and this is not even really just to hone in on women, but this is more so just to talk about everyone who really adopts so many of these like common ideologies. I don't really know what y'all think a man with money is about to bring y'all. Like, and I think it's this idealism that you think that this set circumstance or this set characteristic or this set person is about to bring you. Like, I don't know what y'all think this is about to bring you. Like, when I think about high earning men and the realism in regards to being a high owner and how nobody makes passive income. If you're going to work for money, you're going to work for money. That's what it is, period. And it's so funny how these are the same people, men, women, so forth. Like, I'm putting everyone who has these ideologies in one set group. How people will sit up here and say, oh my God, capitalism and blah, 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 but then simultaneously perpetuate that same thing. So it's like, I just feel like with today, not only is it the blind leading the blind, but people literally do not have the ability to think long term in terms of what does happiness look like for me? What does fulfillment look like for me? And honestly, the whole like dynamic of financials being at the pedestal. Now, let me just say this too. I come from a life where I'm very blessed, right? Like, I am not rich. I was never rich beyond the stretch of imagination, but I did have certain materialistic comfort in my life. So I don't come from poverty. And I do think that the biggest, like, what's really underneath all this uproar in regards to putting money at the forefront in regards to relationships, putting money at the forefront over every other thing that will literally make you happy, or not even happy really, but bring you a sense of fulfillment, especially in terms of relationships. When you do that, to me, I'm seeing and I'm hearing a lot of people who are, one, scarcity minded, two, coming from an impoverished background, and three, like, I don't know. Like, I think that people kind of have this delusion of like, or this illusion that the attainment of X is going to bring Y, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like a lot of people are just kind of at this point where it's like, you guys think that money is about to make you happy and that it's going to solve all your issues and that you're going to meet this man who has all this money and he has all of these emotional skills and he has all like, and it's not to say that it's not likely, but you have to also realize that like, it depends on what he does for a living. And a lot of times people who work and they have a lot of money at a very young age, they're still working, right? So like, it's just like, what? Like, there's just not any realism in regards to these conversations. Like, it's not practical. There's no common sense. It's a widespread of misinformation. And you guys are going to really lead yourselves down a really, really bad path. Like, you're going to be miserable at the end of the day, because I don't really know what you think. Like, I think you have this belief that like, oh, I want to be this housewife, which is so funny because reading this book, Killing the Black Body, and just kind of seeing how, from a historical standpoint, white women were to be housewives while black women were to do field work and work with white women and, you know, take care of their kids and so forth. Just kind of seeing how maybe that desire is really stemming from that, from a historical standpoint. like there's always this underlying sense of ignorance in everything that people are saying that they want. How many times have you said you wanted something and you get it and you're like, oh my God, this is absolutely not what I want? I don't think people realize that, like, being a housewife and just being at home solely, it's not a bad thing, but it's not really something to idolize because you're going to be bored, right? Like, your kids are at work, yes, but like your kids also have their own lives. And yes, even though you're aiding in their personal development, you are also a human being and you are a person, and like you have, or you should have, goals and dreams and things like that. So I think really this whole desire for being with a partner who is like the only thing you can think about is like them being financially wealthy, because that's really what this is about. This is not about character. This is not about ethics. This is not about morale. This is not about core values. This is not about shared interests, common interests, right? This isn't about health. This is about money. And when you pedestalize that, you are blindsided and you overlook a lot of things. And I just think that because this generation, and I can't even say this generation, I think that this current climate of like everyone on the internet and like most content creators and Black women, old, white, Black, you know what I mean? Like, because I can't just say this generation, because it's millennials as well. And people try to say Iyanla is older, right? I'm talking about this particular situation. And it's funny to me, like, hearing people say that, because one thing I remember feeling like a dinosaur, and I'm young, right? I had went out and I was like, wow, I just feel really old. And it's because you have morals. It's because you have values, right? And like a lot of people are willing to forego those things for this said desire. But what it looks like to me is you just have a lot of people who are fearful that they cannot take care of themselves. Like, you just have a lot of people who feel as though they're incapable of doing and being and acquiring, whether it's the lifestyle or whether it's, you know what I mean, taking care of themselves for the long term. So I think that's really what this kind of boils down to. I think that I was listening to this podcast. It was really good. It just was talking about how in America, right, like, women are raised by Cardi B and men are raised by like Jay-Z. And I thought that was so good. And I thought about the pedestalization of celebrities and how real that is, and how so many of the standards and the requirements that so many women have is given to them by celebrities. So like, if you come out, you have like a sound mind and like you're real and you're like, no, these are my learned values. This is what was taught by me. And if you are one of the privileged Black African Americans who has a mother and a father, so now you have grounding in a sense, and you have realism, and you have practicality, and you have good parents, which is like rare. That's like a real luxury, to where you have values. You're going to be like a dinosaur. You're going to be you're like an exception to the rule, because most people don't have that. When I look at the women who permeate these conversations and like pedestalize money at all these, it's because they never had a father. They didn't have a man to provide for them. These girls are trying, they are trying to secure that bag so they can sit down and fill that void of being provided for, because their earthly provider was not there. So like, this isn't a matter of, oh, I want to be with someone who's financially stable because blah, blah, blah. No, this is, I'm pursuing this because one, it was given to me by my role models. And two, because I think that if I get a man with this, then I'll get all these other things, not realizing that that is not at all how that works. And I think in a capitalistic society, money will always be this alluring thing that is seen as the gateway to everything else, right? And if you can acquire a lot of it, then you kind of have this delusion of like, oh, if I can get a lot of it, or if I can get a man with a lot of it, then I'm going to get more stuff, right? I'm going to get more character, more time, more love, more attention, more affection. And it's not true, right? It's absolutely not true. And when I think about single women and its permeation, don't get me wrong, I know that there are a lot of single women who are single not by choice, but I think about the narrative that is so common in regards to like collegiate studies, and how most women who go to college have this belief system that there's not enough men and there's not this, and you know what I mean? And it's like, where does all that come from? Right? And it's like, oh, he has to be like this, and he has to be like this, and he has to be like this. And it's so funny to me, because what is college outside of an accolade? What do you really learn in college? I mean, you may have some good years, but like, all you really learn is a bunch of fanciful words. Working with working with immigrants and so forth, and just listening to them when they try to express themselves and, get me to understand what it is that they're saying. They talk so much, right? And it's like they talk so much, and I think it's not in this bad way. Like, I'm not saying this, to be like in a derogatory way as I'm saying this. I'm more so saying is I realize that they talk so much because as Americans, we talk so much. When I started thinking about the historical context of Americans and the first initial interactions and, Europeans' plan to colonize America, talking to the Native Americans, how they use words, right? And I started thinking about how words and just so many words is what allows a person to be like manipulated, right? Like through words. And I just thought about just tying that all together. And is that not what college gives you? Right? Like what did you really get from the college experience? Like, what do you really get that is making you feel as though this is the set requirement outside of an occupational accolade? And I don't think that it's, men are going to be intimidated. I don't really think that at all. I think it's the value that you place on that and this sense of identity that it kind of gives you, to where it's like, this is the marker, right? Because this is who I am. Like this is what I value, in the sense of like, this is where I'm at. And like, this person has to match that because this is where my value lies. And this is kind of like my version of being equally yoked, And there's nothing wrong with having your standards and your purposes. That's fine. But just don't try to come around permeating narratives that aren't true, because that's where you really miss it on the mark. And I just realized with so many people, this desire and this pedestalization of money and monetary aspects solely is really just rooted in the fact that you don't feel like you can provide for yourself. And it's rooted in the fact that you're scarcity minded, and it's rooted in the fact that you have fear and you don't really know what to expect from a man because you never had a man in your life. So you don't really believe in, you know what I mean? And like, I guess we could talk about it from a historical standpoint, but nah, man. Because that's not everybody's, you know what I mean? Like, it's not this one linear thing where like, this is absolutely what to be expected if you make more money or whatever, you know what I mean? And so people talk like it's truth. And if you listen to all the words, it sounds good. And it sounds like something you should believe in. And it sounds like something that, is educational because you may not understand it. And it sounds good. But that has been the entire educational system. It's always been a bunch of words, a bunch of information, but like, there's no real life experience. There's no truth. There's no real applicable context that you can, there's nothing you can get and apply in the real world. And like, you're just fed all these lies, and you look up, and I personally, I'm 100% so big on this, especially when it comes to social media, especially if people are sharing things and you follow them and you want to subscribe to their philosophies. You need to ask yourself, like, discern, like, with this person, their life, everything, like, is that what you want for yourself? And if the answer is no, then I probably wouldn't listen to them and take their advice. I think one of the things that is probably the most unfortunate is because it's continuous, right? Because of the historical degradation of a Black woman today are put in this very like glass box where there is no room for growth. There is no room for correction. There is no room for accountability. And I think the only way to really gauge that, I think this is what some men have done, because even when you think about abusive mothers, right? You think about mothers who are enmeshed with their sons, right? Sheena Tubbs talked about that on a really good podcast episode with Black Girls Heal. You think about the mothers who manipulate their sons, right? You think about the mothers who control their sons, who play on their sons' desire to protect and their unconditional love for their mothers. Like, women are never held accountable for anything. And I think a big part of it is because of that. I think women have united in such a way to where it's like any room for correction is just kind of like thrown away. And I think it's unfortunate because so many people are being led astray, and you're listening to people who don't have that element of like accountability. And then you're going to look up and you're going to be very miserable. You're going to be very unhappy because you never really made choices that was, you've never been corrected. And you know why I really think that is? I think it's because your father comes into your life and disciplines you and corrects you and guides you and tells you no, you know what I mean? Like, but your mother, typically, your mother loves you unconditionally. So if you don't have that self-awareness piece, and now today women don't, like, it's not even just women, but like people in general, humility is a lost virtue. So it's like when you don't have that, it's going to be very hard for you to grow. God tells us, like, he loves those who he chastens. And just to see so many women kind of just going off the deep end, putting the wrong things on the pedestal. And it's also very sad too to see so many men going to such extremes because of these conversations. I don't think that women, and this is the thing too, I think this goes back to the lack of fathers. But to get online and basically say someone's not worthy of something because they don't make an X amount of money, I think that's so dehumanizing. And that is so interesting to just kind of see women perpetuate the same narratives that they were fighting against at like one little segment in culture where we were like, you know, with the Samuels thing and the whole beauty and desirability and like, and I don't know. I think that what men have done, because they are literally helpless in a lot of these situations, is kind of like amplified in their voices, amplified in the abuse, right? To try to steward and correct. And is it right? No. But I think that that's really where a lot of it is coming from, because what else can they do, right? Besides exert some type of abuse and force and violence because of that pain. And I think when we go online and we share certain things, we don't really care what we say. It's just like, I'm trying to sound good. I'm trying to sound cool to my girls. I'm trying to, you know what I mean? And it just becomes that. And I don't think we consider, like, whether it be the men in our lives. And that's the thing too, like, I talked about privilege in that last episode. Just a lot of people just not realizing the privilege of having good uncles, a good father, or a father. You know what I mean? He's may not be the best, may not be perfect, but he's there. You know, in certain experiences in childhood that really set you up for, you know, to be a whole person, like to be a whole well-rounded person. A lot of people don't realize that. And so when you have this permeation, and really these conversations are really rooted in not having fathers, because I just don't really understand why you would think that someone, you know what I mean, of a certain financial bracket is going to come and bring you all these things. And it's kind of like a childhood fantasy. It's kind of like that inner child that is like dreaming. And I think to kind of elude the pain would be to be delusional in a sense about, you know, in a sense with this desire, and put it on a pedestal and say like, no, once I get this guy, this is going to be that. And then you see the images and you see the trips and you see all these things. And I think if you just never had a provider, you've never had that, then you're going to fantasize, you're going to dream, you know, and you just don't realize like the reality like of America. And we talk about capitalism. If you make a lot of money, you work a lot, period. Period. You know, and so there's just a lot of fantasy that really goes around on the internet. And I think it's unfortunate the women who have been kind of siloed and isolated in institutions and through institutionalized learning, and the narratives they've been given and the narratives that they've failed to kind of like deconstruct and unravel and just kind of like question maybe a little bit. And yeah, it's just very interesting. Every woman that I know who've kind of believed in that, like, oh, I'm only going to date this type of person, I'm only going to do this. These women never marry, and they're never happy. And like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not putting marriage on the pedestal, but it's just funny to just see so many women really lying to themselves about fulfillment, right? Like settling for these breadcrumbing relationships because you have to have the money, because you have to have, you know what I mean, certain things. And it's just like, but look at all that you've settled for, you know? So it's like, wait, like, I'm confused. Like, I thought this was, you know what I mean? Like, I thought it was more than that. I thought it was the emotional, you know what I mean? All these different things. And so it's just interesting to kind of see all this play out. And you guys know here at Renaissance Room, we document culture. I talk about culture. I share my observations. But this has been a very interesting thing. And it's just crazy just to see it being that. And I think that there comes a point where you have to kind of grow up, and I'm gonna end with this. You have to kind of grow up, and you have to realize that dreams are just dreams. It's just dreams. It's just a fantasy. There's nothing wrong with dreaming. It's nice to have a healthy imagination to take you away from reality. But your mental strength and your resilience, for the resilience that you're going to need for your existence, is going to come from being able to deal with reality. It's going to come from your ability to grow, and you know what I mean? And I don't know, it's just been very interesting to see a lot of people really struggle with identity crisis, but because they have the title of celebrityism, or if they have a certain financial income or background or whatever, they're then kind of put on this pedestalized and given the opportunity to speak into the lives of other people. And so what you have is money versus morale, right? Money versus ethics. And I think that we kind of see this in the media, how a lot of times the conversation is that, okay, if you have money, then you don't have ethics, or you don't have morals, or you don't have, you know what I mean? And so it just becomes this very like matrix kind of like paradigm that shifts in the minds of so many people, and like people really aren't able to get out of that and be real with themselves. Like, okay, what do I value, right? Because values and standards and those things have become so superficial. It's no longer about the character of a person. It's about the occupation of a person. It's about the commodity of a person. And I think that's what happens when we have social media marketing and the products that we're being sold, and we have an audience we're trying to reach. And you know what I mean? Very slowly, we kind of start to see each other as opportunities. And so that human connection that will really give us fulfillment in our ability to grow and flourish and nourish and have these very beautiful relationship dynamics is gone away. And when women are coddled and when people are coddled, right? And I think a big part of the coddling really comes from the pain that is never really addressed in the lives of so many. And so people are hurting, right? But people are also given platforms. So it's like, it just becomes very dangerous, and the misinformation is widespread, right? And you can easily get chunks and bits and pieces about history and, you know what I mean? But you're never really able to formulate a whole well-rounded opinion because you don't have the experience, right, to really speak to or minister to the information, right? Like you can't tie it all together. So it's like you have memes, but you have no context. You know what I mean? You have Instagram posts, but you have no wisdom. You have no real world experience, right? There's no way to really like apply that. So it's really sad to see. And I think at the end of the day, now more than ever is the time to disconnect, yes, but if you don't know yourself, you got to really be real with yourself, because people are no longer thinking long term. And when I say know yourself, really figure out who you are, because if you're going to be influenced by decisions, you at least want to be making decisions that are going to set you up for happiness in the long run. And really what a lot of people are doing is they're setting themselves up for misery in the long run because they don't know themselves, and they're being influenced by the media and people who get online who appear to have money and who appear to have X, Y, and Z. And you let these people speak into your life, and you look up and you made all these choices for the short term, right? It was good to get this person because they had money, and it was good to get this person. I think we've seen this too, like with the YouTube couples, right? When relationships, like that was really like the height of where relationships started to become profitable. And then outside of that, it was like, okay, we're on Instagram. And then Instagram kind of became the place where relationships started to become profitable. And now we're kind of at this point where it's become so normal that people can actually go into a marriage or a business or whatever and actually make money offline by showcasing pictures and sharing their house and their family and taking you on the tours and things like that, which is not all bad, but it really says a lot, and it erodes the privacy, and it kind of gives this, this is about the money, it's about the fantasy, it's about all these different things. I was thinking about that guy Twitch who died, and just that entire story, right? That was very revealing, right? And so I just think it's one of those things where it's like we have to be so mindful of what we do and the choices that we make. And I think because we never had the father figures to really harness and cultivate resilience, motivation, self-determination, and strong cognitive abilities, right? That mental fortitude. We've been so wrapped up in our feelings, right? Like women are emotional, women have feelings. That's just what it is. And that's not to say that women can't be rational, but women are emotional, and it's okay, right? It's a beautiful thing. But when you have so much of that and you don't have the other element, you grow up with a lot of people who are not whole. They're very partial in a lot of ways in which they do things. And they don't really come from a very like well-rounded perspective. They come from a very narrow perspective, and it gets messy, right? It gets messy. So that's something to consider. And it's something to really think about, honestly. And I just think that our ability to think long-term is non-existent. It's going out the window, right? Everyone is here for now, right? Because today is enough for a lot of people. Like today is a lot. And it would just be a very unfortunate thing to look up and live your life and realize that you live for other people. But that's essentially what's happening, right? Date who you want to date. Go where you want to go. Live the kind of life you want to live. If you want to be a writer, you want to be a teacher, you do that. You're always going to have people who are going to share their negative experiences. You're always going to have women who have their opinions about what is expected and what is not expected. But again, from a collegial standpoint, from a historical standpoint, this has all been planned, right? This has all been something that has been historically, systemically documented. It's the division and the destruction between black men and black women. You even look at it in the movies, right? There's always a successful black woman and she can't find a man. Why can't she find a man? Right? You know what I mean? So like these women aren't really saying anything new, but it's very clear that to me is a very old paradigm that needs to be obstructed if you are to really have a happy life. If, whatever that looks like for you, or, personal levels of fulfillment. And you're just not going to get that if you keep listening to other people and you're putting things that you don't value at the forefront because other people tell you to put those things at the forefront. You know how many relationship coaches sell people an idea about love, about dating, about the perfect partner, about the perfect circumstance, and it just doesn't exist. And I'm not saying settle, but like ask yourself, what is settling to you? But what is settling to you though? You know what I mean? And have you even really put the time in to get to know a person? Because we know today that everything is about instant gratification. Nobody ain't really trying to take time and ask questions. No, so be real with yourself, because I think that that's really going to save you from a lifetime of misery.